I watched from the doorway as my mother handed the keys to my car, the one I'd saved for 3 years to buy, to my sister Emma. The silver Honda Civic I'd worked double shifts at the diner for, the one I'd skipped meals to afford, was now dangling from Emma's perfectly manicured fingers. "Mom, that's my car," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. My mother didn't even look at me. "Emma needs it more, Rachel. She has that internship downtown, and you know how important her career is. You can take the bus." Emma smirked at me over Mom's shoulder, twirling the keys like a trophy. "Thanks, Mom. You're the best." She didn't even glance my way as she sauntered past me, her designer perfume, bought with Dad's credit card, filling the hallway. This wasn't the first time. It would never be the last time. Except it was. Because 3 weeks later, I died. The brakes failed on Highway 95. Emma had been driving my car, of course she had, but she'd lent it to her boyfriend that night. He walked away with a broken arm. I was in the passenger seat. The doctor said I died instantly when we hit the median, but that wasn't quite true. I remembered every agonizing second, the metal crushing inward, the sound of my own screaming, the taste of blood, and then nothing. And then everything. I woke up gasping in my childhood bedroom, my 13th birthday decorations still hanging on the walls, the Hannah Montana poster, the glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling, the diary with the broken lock that Emma used to read and mock me for. It was September 15th, 2015. I was 13 years old again. I had died at 26, and now I was 13, and I remembered everything, every betrayal, every cruelty. Every time they chose Emma over me. Every time Dad looked right through me like I was invisible. Every time Mom sighed with disappointment when I walked into a room. Every time Emma stole something of mine and got away with it because she was the pretty one, the talented one, the one who mattered. I sat up in bed, my heart hammering. My hands were small again, my body awkward and gangly in a way I'd forgotten. But my mind was sharp, clear, full of 13 years of future memories. I knew exactly how the next 13 years would unfold if I let them. I wasn't going to let them. The abuse had started so gradually I hadn't even noticed it at first. Or maybe I had noticed, but I'd made excuses because they were my family, and families loved each other, right? Wrong. Emma was born first, 3 years before me. She was premature, a miracle baby who'd spent weeks in the NICU fighting for her life. Mom and Dad had bonded with her through that trauma in a way they never bonded with me. I came later, easy and healthy, and somehow that made me less precious, less worthy of their attention. By the time I was old enough to understand family dynamics, the pattern was already set. Emma was the golden child, and I was the spare. When Emma wanted piano lessons, I had to give up my art classes because they couldn't afford both. When Emma needed a new laptop for school, my birthday money went toward it. When Emma got caught cheating on a test, I was grounded for being a bad influence, even though I was in a completely different grade. It wasn't just favoritism, it was systematic erasure. Mom forgot my parent-teacher conferences but never missed Emma's recitals. Dad took Emma to father-daughter dances, but told me he was too busy when I asked. They paid for Emma's college applications, all 15 of them, but told me I'd have to figure out community college on my own because money was tight. Money was never tight for Emma. In my first life, I'd absorbed it all. I'd bent myself into knots trying to be good enough, trying to earn scraps of their love. I'd worked myself to exhaustion trying to prove I had value too. And where had it gotten me? Dead at 26? In a car accident while riding in the vehicle I'd bought with my own money? A car they'd given away to Emma like it was nothing. But that wasn't even the worst part. The worst part was what I'd learned in the weeks before the accident. I'd been cleaning out the attic, helping Mom prepare for a garage sale she was planning, when I'd found a box of old documents. Financial records, legal papers. My grandmother, Dad's mother, who died when I was 6, had left a trust fund. For me. Specifically for me. It was worth over $300,000, designated for my education and future. There were letters she'd written, expressing concern about how my parents treated me, how Emma got everything while I got nothing. She'd wanted to ensure I had resources, independence, a chance at a real life. My parents had known about it for 20 years. They'd never told me. They'd used it instead to fund Emma's education, her apartment, her trips to Europe, her designer wardrobe. They'd forged signatures, manipulated paperwork, convinced the trustee that the money was better spent on family needs. By the time I found out, the trust was almost empty. When I'd confronted them, 3 days before the accident, they'd shrugged. Emma needed it more, Mom had said. You've always been self-sufficient. Self-sufficient meant neglected. It meant they could ignore me guilt-free. I'd been so angry, so devastated, that I'd barely been functional. I'd spent hours crying, questioning everything I'd ever believed about family and love. And then I'd died. And then I'd woken up here at 13, with all those memories burning in my mind like acid. Now, lying in my childhood bed with glow-in-the-dark stars overhead, I made a decision. I would not be their victim again. I would not spend 13 years working myself into the ground for scraps of approval. I would not die at 26 in a car they'd stolen from me. I would use every advantage I had, and I had the ultimate advantage. I knew the future. I knew which stocks would soar, which companies would explode, which investments would pay off. I knew winning lottery numbers for the next year. I knew which real estate would skyrocket in value. Most importantly, I knew exactly how cruel my family could be, and I would never give them the chance to hurt me again. The next morning, I came downstairs to find Emma eating cereal at the kitchen table, complaining about her new phone being the wrong color. She was 16, already beautiful in that effortless way that made adults coo over her. She barely glanced at me as I entered. "Rachel, there's oatmeal on the stove," Mom said absently, scrolling through her phone. "Emma needs a ride to cheerleading practice in 20 minutes. In my first life, I would have gulped down the oatmeal and then sat quietly in the car while Emma ignored me. But I wasn't that Rachel anymore. "I have plans," I said simply. Mom looked up, startled. "What plans?" "My own plans," Emma snorted. "Since when do you have plans?" I smiled at her, and something in my expression must have been off because she actually flinched. "Good. Since now, you'll have to get your own ride." I walked out before Mom could argue, my backpack slung over my shoulder. I had exactly $37 in my room, birthday money I'd been saving, and I had a plan for every single cent. First stop, the convenience store 3 blocks away. I knew the lottery numbers for tonight's drawing. It was a small jackpot by lottery standards, only 8 million, but it was a rollover week, which meant fewer winners to split with. In my first life, a truck driver from Montana had won it. In this life, I would. I was 13, too young to buy a lottery ticket legally, but I wasn't stupid, and I wasn't the naive girl I'd been before. I'd spent 13 years in the adult world before dying. I knew how to manipulate, negotiate, get what I needed. There was a homeless man who usually sat outside the convenience store, a veteran named Marcus who'd been kind to me in my first life. I'd bought him coffee once when I was 16, and he'd told me about his daughter, about the shelter system, about how invisible people like him became. He was there now, sitting against the brick wall with a cardboard sign. "Marcus," I said, crouching down to his level. He looked at me with tired eyes. "Yeah, kid?" "I need a favor. I'll give you $20 now. And if this works out, I'll give you $5,000 next week." He blinked. "What kind of favor?" I explained quickly, efficiently. I needed him to buy a lottery ticket with specific numbers. I'd give him $20 now for food and supplies. If we won, when we won, I'd give him $5,000 cash, no questions asked. He could keep his anonymity. I just needed him to claim the ticket and then give me the money. "Why would you do this?" he asked suspiciously. "Because I know these numbers are going to win," I said simply. "And I'm 13. I can't claim a lottery prize, but you can, and I keep my promises." He studied me for a long moment. Then he nodded. "What are the numbers?" I recited them carefully and made him repeat them back 3 times. I gave him $25 instead of 20, enough for food and the ticket. He looked at the money like it might disappear. "I'll be back tomorrow," I said. "Same time." "What if I just keep the winnings?" he asked bluntly. I met his eyes. "You won't. You're a good man, Marcus. And you know what it's like to be invisible, to have people look right through you. So do I." Something shifted in his expression. He nodded slowly. I went to school that day and paid attention in ways I never had before. Not to the lessons, I'd already learned all this, but to the social dynamics, the power structures, the kids who would matter in 10 years, and the kids who were already being left behind. I sat in math class and watched Emma hold court with the popular girls, her laugh bright and musical. She didn't even notice me sitting 3 rows back. She never did. At lunch, I sat alone and pulled out a notebook. I started making lists, plans, calculations. I had $8 million coming in. After taxes and Marcus's cut, about $4 million. That would be my seed money. I knew Bitcoin was about to explode. I knew which stocks would surge. I knew Amazon was still relatively cheap, that Apple was about to revolutionize the smartphone market, that Tesla was going to change the auto industry. I knew which properties in my city were going to triple in value, which neighborhoods were on the verge of gentrification. I had 13 years of financial knowledge compressed into my 13-year-old brain. I was going to be rich, and more than that, I was going to be free. That night at dinner, Dad came home late from work, exhausted and irritable. He kissed Emma's forehead and asked about her day. She launched into a story about cheerleading practice, about the routine they were learning, about the competition in November. He listened with genuine interest, asking questions, encouraging her. Then he looked at me. "How was school, Rachel?" "Fine." He nodded and went back to his food. That was it. The entire extent of his interest in my life. In my first life, that would have crushed me. I would have gone to bed crying, wondering what was wrong with me, why I wasn't enough. Now I just smiled and ate my dinner, thinking about my lottery ticket and my future. The next day, Marcus was waiting for me outside the convenience store. His eyes were wide, his hands shaking as he held out a lottery ticket. "It won," he whispered. "Holy shit, kid, it won. All 6 numbers, $8 million. I felt a rush of relief so profound I almost collapsed. It had worked. I'd remembered correctly. The future could be changed, and I could change it. "Okay," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Here's what we do next." Over the next week, I coached Marcus through claiming the prize, setting up the payment structure, ensuring everything was legal and above board. I met him at the shelter he stayed at, brought him clean clothes for the press conferences, helped him practice his story. I made him promise to put $200,000 into a trust for himself, managed by a reputable advisor. He cried when I insisted. "Why are you doing this?" he asked me. "You could have found any homeless person to do this. Why me?" "Because you bought me coffee once," I said, "in another life, and kindness should be rewarded." He didn't understand, but he didn't need to. When the money came through, lump sum, minus taxes, minus Marcus's cut, I had $4.2 million. I was 13 years old and I was a multimillionaire. The hard part was hiding it from my family. I set up accounts in the name of a shell corporation I created with Marcus's help. He signed the papers as the adult representative, but the money was mine. I opened a bank account at a branch across town where no one knew my family. I started making investments immediately, carefully, using brokerages that didn't ask too many questions about the age of their clients, as long as the money was real. At home, I was still invisible Rachel, still the spare daughter, still ignored and overlooked. But now, it didn't hurt, because I had a secret. I bought my first property 3 months after my 13th birthday. It was a foreclosed house in a neighborhood I knew would gentrify within 5 years. I paid $147,000 cash through my LLC. I hired contractors to renovate it, then rented it out. 6 months later, I bought another property, then another. By the time I was 14, I owned 6 rental properties and had a stock portfolio worth over $8 million. By the time I was 15, I was worth nearly $15 million, and my family still had no idea. I watched them from the outside now, like studying specimens in a lab. I saw the way Mom's face lit up when Emma walked into a room and stayed neutral when I appeared. I saw how Dad saved his jokes, his stories, his warmth for his golden daughter. I saw how Emma took and took and took, never once saying thank you because she'd been taught the world owed her everything. I stopped trying to earn their love. Instead, I documented their neglect. Every forgotten birthday, every missed event, every time they chose Emma over me, I kept records. I saved emails, texts, voicemails. I kept a detailed journal with dates and times and witnesses. I recorded conversations when I could. I wasn't sure what I'd do with all this documentation, but some instinct told me I'd need it eventually. In my first life, I'd stayed home for college. attending community college while working multiple jobs, barely scraping by. Emma had gone to a prestigious university 3 states away, fully funded by our parents, or rather by my grandmother's trust fund that should have been mine. This time would be different. When I was 16, I got my driver's license. With my own money, I bought a car. A modest Toyota, nothing flashy, registered to my LLC. I told my parents I'd saved up from a part-time job at the library. They barely reacted. Emma, meanwhile, was already demanding a BMW for her 19th birthday. Everyone at college has nice cars, she whined at dinner one night. It's embarrassing to drive something old. She was driving a 3-year-old Honda Accord, the same model that, in my first life, would eventually be my car, the one they'd give her, the one I'd die in. In this timeline, that would never happen. "We'll see what we can do, sweetheart," Dad said, smiling at her. I said nothing. I just ate my food and thought about my stock portfolio, which had just crested $20 million. I was 16 years old and wealthier than my parents would ever be, and they had no idea. The summer before my senior year of high school, things came to a head. Emma's college graduation was approaching. She'd majored in communications with a minor in fashion marketing, coasted on gentlemen's seas, and spent most of her time at parties and formals. She had no job prospects and no real skills, but Mom and Dad were treating her graduation like she'd won a Nobel Prize. They planned a huge party, invited everyone they knew, rented out a banquet hall. They spent over $15,000 on the celebration. My own high school graduation was the same month. I'd graduated as valedictorian, earned a full scholarship to multiple prestigious universities, won awards for academic excellence. My parents took me to Olive Garden and gave me a $50 gift card to Target. That was when something inside me finally completely hardened into diamond. I sat across from them in that booth at Olive Garden, watching my mother scroll through photos of Emma's graduation party on her phone, listening to my father talk about how proud he was of Emma's accomplishments, and I felt nothing but cold, clear certainty. They would never see me. They would never value me. They would never love me the way I desperately wanted them to when I was younger. And I was done wanting it. "I've been accepted to Stanford," I said calmly, cutting through Dad's monologue about Emma's job search. "Full scholarship. I'll be majoring in business and computer science." They both looked at me blankly, as if surprised I could speak. "Stanford," Mom repeated. "That's in California." "Yes, that's so far away," she said, frowning. "What about State University? Emma went there, and it's only 2 hours away." "And I'm going to Stanford." Dad shook his head. "Rachel, be reasonable. You can't just move across the country. What if you need something? What if there's an emergency?" I almost laughed. When had they ever been there for me when I needed something? When had they ever cared about my emergencies? "I'll be fine," I said simply. "But the cost of living in California," Mom started. "I have it covered." They exchanged glances. "With what money?" Dad asked. "My money." Emma had joined us by then, fresh from a shopping trip with her friends, carrying bags from stores my parents' credit cards had paid for. She slid into the booth next to Mom, barely acknowledging me. "Did I hear Stanford?" she asked, pulling out her phone. "Isn't that where boring people go?" "It's where smart people go," I corrected. "But you wouldn't know about that." Her head snapped up, eyes narrowing. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing. Enjoy your Olive Garden." I stood up, left 2 20s on the table for my meal, and walked out. I heard Mom calling after me, but I didn't turn around. I got in my Toyota and drove to the property I'd bought 6 months earlier, a beautiful 3-bedroom house in an up-and-coming neighborhood, fully renovated, currently being staged for rental, except I wasn't going to rent it anymore. I was going to live in it. I called the property management company and told them to cancel the listing. This was my house now, mine. The first place I'd ever lived that was truly, completely mine. I walked through the empty rooms, my footsteps echoing on the hardwood floors I'd chosen, past the windows I'd had installed, through the kitchen I'd had renovated to be perfect. Everything in this house existed because I had made it exist. Every detail had been my choice. No one had given this to me. No one could take it away. I stood in the master bedroom, my bedroom, and looked out the window at the tree-lined street, at the neighborhood full of young professionals and families, at the life I'd built for myself entirely separate from my family, and I started planning my next move. The first warning they should have noticed was when I didn't come home that night, or the next, or the week after that. I moved into my house completely, transferring everything I cared about, which wasn't much, in 2 carloads. I left behind the childhood bedroom with its glow-in-the-dark stars, left behind the life where I was invisible and unimportant. When Mom finally called 3 days later, she sounded annoyed rather than worried. "Where are you?" she demanded. "You just disappeared." "I moved out." "Moved out? Rachel, you're 17. You can't just move out." "I'm 18 in 2 months, and yes, I can. I have my own place." Silence. Then, "Your own place? What are you talking about? You don't have money for your own place." "Actually, I do." More silence. I could hear her confusion, her inability to reconcile the daughter she'd ignored with someone who had resources and agency. "This is ridiculous," she finally said. "Come home right now. We need to talk about this as a family." "No, Rachel. I'll see you at graduation. Goodbye, Mom." I hung up. She called back 7 times. I didn't answer. Dad called once. I didn't answer that either. Emma sent a text. "WTF is your problem?" I didn't respond. For the first time in my life, both lives, I had peace, complete, total peace. I spent the next 2 months preparing for Stanford. I invested the last of my liquid capital into a startup I knew would explode, a food delivery app that would become a household name. I moved the rest into long-term stocks and bonds. I set up automatic payments for my property management, utilities, and expenses. I was 18 years old, worth approximately $30 million, and completely independent. The only time I saw my family before leaving for California was at my high school graduation. They sat in the auditorium, Mom, Dad, and Emma, looking uncomfortable and out of place. I gave my valedictorian speech about resilience, about creating your own path, about not letting others define your worth. I didn't look at them once while I spoke, but I knew they were watching. After the ceremony, they found me in the parking lot. "Rachel," Mom said, her voice strained, "we need to talk." "About what?" "About whatever is going on with you, this attitude, this disappearing act, this," she gestured vaguely, "whatever this is. There's nothing going on. I'm just living my life." Emma crossed her arms. "You're being dramatic." "So what? You moved into some apartment? Big deal. You'll be crawling back when you realize how expensive it is to live alone." I smiled at her. "It's a house, actually. A 3-bedroom house that I own. Fully paid off, and I won't be crawling back because I don't need anything from any of you." They stared at me. "You own a house?" Dad said slowly. "Rachel, what are you talking about?" "Exactly what I said. I own property. Multiple properties, actually. I have investments. I have a portfolio. I have everything I need to never depend on this family again." "That's impossible," Mom said flatly. "You're 18 years old. You can't own property." "And yet I do." Emma laughed, sharp and disbelieving. "You're insane. Where would you get money for property?" I looked at her, really looked at her, seeing the girl who'd taken everything from me in another life, who would have continued taking in this one if I'd let her. And I felt nothing but cold satisfaction. "That's none of your business," I said simply. Dad stepped forward, trying his authoritative voice. "Rachel, if you've gotten involved in something illegal—" "I haven't. Everything I've done is completely legal. You can check—" "Then where did you get the money?" he demanded. "Again, none of your business. I'm 18. I'm an adult. My finances are my own." Mom's face had gone pale. "This doesn't make sense. You've been living at home, going to school—" "While building my own life," I interrupted. "The life you never cared about. The life you never asked about. You were so busy with Emma, so focused on her, that you never once noticed what I was doing." "That's not fair," Mom said, her voice rising. "We've always treated you girls equally." "No," I said, my voice cutting through her protest like a blade. "You haven't. You've treated Emma like a princess and me like an inconvenience. You gave her everything and gave me nothing. You forgot my birthdays, missed my events, dismissed my achievements. You gave her my grandmother's trust fund, the one she left specifically for me, and hoped I'd never find out." The silence that fell was deafening. Mom's face went white. Dad's mouth opened and closed. Emma looked confused, glancing between our parents. "You knew about that?" Mom whispered. "I found out, eventually, in another life." And now, in this one, I made sure I'd never need it. I made sure I'd never need any of you. I turned to walk away, then paused. By the way, I'm leaving for Stanford in 2 weeks. Don't bother coming to visit. I won't be available. I left them standing in that parking lot, their shock and confusion trailing behind me like ghosts. I didn't see them again for 5 years. Those 5 years were the best years of my life. At Stanford, I thrived. I double majored in business and computer science, maintained a 4.0 GPA, joined investment clubs, and networked with the brilliant minds who would shape the next decade of technology. I used my knowledge of the future selectively, carefully, making connections and investments that seemed prescient but not impossible. I launched my own venture capital firm in my junior year, using my portfolio as seed money. Within 18 months, I'd invested in 6 startups that would become unicorns. My net worth crossed $100 million by the time I was 22. I bought a penthouse in San Francisco. I hired a personal assistant. I wore designer clothes and attended galas and fundraisers. I gave speeches at business conferences. I was featured in Forbes' Hard to You 30 Under 30 Inches list. I became everything my family had always treated Emma as: successful, important, worthy of attention. Except I'd earned it myself. And through it all, my family tried to contact me. At first, it was occasional. A text from Mom asking how school was going. A call from Dad on my birthday. An email from Emma asking if I wanted to get coffee when I was back home. I ignored them all. As the years passed and my success became more public, as my name started appearing in business magazines, as my net worth became a matter of public record, the contacts became more frequent, more desperate. Mom sent cards, letters, care packages. Dad left long voicemails about wanting to reconnect. Emma sent texts that vacillated between friendly and accusatory. Why are you ignoring us? We're family. You can't shut us out forever. I could, actually, and I did. By the time I was 25, older than I'd lived in my first life, I was worth over $200 million. My venture capital firm was one of the most successful in Silicon Valley. I'd been named one of the most influential young investors in the country. I'd also started a foundation dedicated to helping young people from abusive or neglectful families gain financial independence. We provided scholarships, mentorship, job training, and seed funding for entrepreneurs. We helped thousands of kids who'd been treated as less than by their families build successful lives for themselves. Marcus was one of my foundation's board members. He'd used his initial money to get sober, find housing, and start his own nonprofit helping homeless veterans. We'd stayed in touch over the years, this strange friendship built on a lottery ticket and mutual understanding of invisibility. "When are you going to deal with your family?" he asked me one day, over coffee at my favorite cafe in Pacific Heights. "Never," I said simply. "Rachel," he said gently, "I see the work you do with the foundation. I see how much you care about helping kids escape abuse. But you're still carrying that anger. You're still letting them take up space in your head. They don't. They do. Every person you help, every scholarship you fund, you're trying to save yourself. And that's good. That's important work. But eventually, you need closure." I didn't want closure. I wanted them to hurt the way they'd hurt me. But Marcus was right about one thing. I was letting them occupy space in my mind, and that was giving them power I'd sworn they'd never have again. So I made a decision. I would go back home. One time, one visit. I would show them exactly what they'd lost when they chose to overlook me, to neglect me, to treat me as disposable. And then I would walk away forever with my head high and my conscience clear. I planned the trip carefully. I bought a new car, a Tesla Model S, sleek and expensive. I had my stylist choose an outfit that screamed quiet wealth. Tailored slacks, a designer blouse, the kind of jewelry that only people with real money wore. I looked successful and polished and completely untouchable. I didn't tell them I was coming. It was a Saturday in October when I pulled up to my childhood home in my Tesla. The house looked smaller than I remembered, shabbier. The paint was peeling on the shutters. The lawn needed mowing. I sat in my car for a moment, taking deep breaths, centering myself. This was just a visit. I was in control. I had all the power here. When I knocked on the door, Emma answered. She'd aged badly. Only 28, but she looked older, harder. Her face was puffy, her clothes were cheap mall brands, and her hair needed touching up. The beautiful golden girl I remembered was gone, replaced by someone who looked tired and disappointed by life. Rachel, she said, her eyes widening. Oh my God, Rachel. She tried to hug me. I stepped back. Is everyone home? I asked coolly. Yes, Mom and Dad are in the kitchen. Rachel, it's been so long. We've been trying to reach you. I know. I walked past her into the house. It looked even worse inside. Furniture worn and old, carpet stained. The kind of house people lived in when money was tight and getting tighter. Mom and Dad were indeed in the kitchen. Mom was doing dishes. Dad was reading the newspaper at the table. They both looked up when I entered, and the shock on their faces was almost comical. Rachel! Mom dropped a plate. It shattered on the floor. Oh my God, Rachel! She rushed toward me, arms outstretched. I held up a hand, stopping her. I'm not here for a reunion, I said flatly. I'm here to say goodbye. Officially and finally. Dad stood up, his face a mixture of hope and confusion. Honey, what are you talking about? We've been trying to get in touch with you for years, and I've been ignoring you. Yes, deliberately. But why? Mom's voice broke. We're your family. We love you. I laughed. I couldn't help it. The sound was bitter and sharp in the small kitchen. You love me? Really? Is that what you call what you did to me for 18 years? We raised you, Dad started. You neglected me, I interrupted. You gave Emma everything and gave me scraps. You forgot my birthdays, missed my events, dismissed my accomplishments. You stole my inheritance and gave it to her. You treated me like I was invisible, like I didn't matter, like I was a burden you wished you didn't have to bear. Emma had followed me into the kitchen. That's not true, she said, but her voice was weak. They treated us the same. No, I said, turning to face her. They didn't. You got everything. I got nothing. And you know what the worst part was? You never even noticed. You took and took and took. And you never once said thank you because you thought you deserved it all. Rachel, please, Mom was crying now. We made mistakes, yes, but we were trying our best. Your best was terrible. Your best was borderline abusive. Your best left me feeling worthless and unwanted for my entire childhood. Then let us make it up to you, Dad said, his voice pleading. We want to be part of your life. We've seen your success, read about your company. We're so proud of you. Now you're proud, now that I'm rich and famous. Now that other people think I'm valuable, suddenly I matter to you. I shook my head. That's not how this works. Mom stepped forward, her hands clasped like she was praying. Please, Rachel, we're your family. Families forgive each other. Families protect each other, I shot back. Families support each other. Families don't steal from their own children and lie about it for 20 years. The silence that followed was heavy with guilt. We needed the money, Dad finally said, his voice hoarse. Emma's school, her opportunities, were paid for with my money. Money my grandmother left specifically for me because she saw how you treated me and wanted to help me escape. I pulled out my phone and pulled up a document I'd had my lawyers prepare. This is a copy of Grandma's will and the trust documents. She specified that the money was for Rachel's education and future independence. Not for family needs. Not for Emma. For me. I set the phone on the table. They all stared at it like it might bite them. You committed fraud, I continued. You forged signatures, manipulated paperwork, and embezzled over $300,000 from a trust that wasn't yours to touch. I could have you arrested. I could sue you for every penny you have left, which, from the looks of this house, isn't much. Mom's face had gone gray. You wouldn't... I could, I said, but I won't. Do you know why? They shook their heads. Because you're not worth it. Because prosecuting you would mean spending more time thinking about you, dealing with you, being connected to you, and I don't want that. I don't want you in my life at all. Rachel, please. Emma's voice was desperate now. We can fix this. We can be a real family. We were never a real family, and we never will be. I turned to leave, but Mom grabbed my arm. Wait, please, we need... She broke off, tears streaming down her face. We need help, financial help. Emma lost her job and your father's hours got cut, and we're behind on the mortgage. There it was. The real reason they wanted me back. Not because they loved me, not because they regretted how they'd treated me, but because they needed my money. I looked down at her hand on my arm until she let go. You want my money? I said slowly. After everything you did to me, after stealing my inheritance, after 18 years of neglect and dismissal, you want me to give you money. You have so much, Dad said, his voice breaking. We read the articles. You're worth hundreds of millions. We only need a little help just to get back on our feet. No, Rachel, no, I repeated louder this time. You don't get to neglect me for 18 years, steal from me, treat me like garbage, and then ask for my money when you're desperate. You don't get to ignore me my entire childhood and then come crawling back when I'm successful. That's not how this works. So you're just going to let us lose our house? Mom's tears had stopped. Now she just looked angry. You're going to let your family become homeless out of spite? The same way you let me feel homeless my entire childhood? I countered. The same way you let me struggle and scrape and work myself to exhaustion while you gave Emma everything? Yes, exactly the same way. Emma's face had crumpled. I never asked for any of this. I didn't know about the trust fund. But you never questioned it, did you? I said, looking at her directly. You never wondered why you got everything while I got nothing. You never thought it was strange that you had a new car and designer clothes and trips to Europe while I was wearing thrift store outfits and working part-time jobs. You just took it all and assumed you deserved it. She had no answer for that. I pulled out my wallet and took out a $1 bill. I set it on the kitchen table. There, I said. That's more than you ever gave me emotionally. Consider us even. I walked toward the door. Behind me, I heard Mom sobbing, Dad pleading, Emma cursing. I didn't turn around. At the door, I paused. One final thing needed to be said. I'm going to be wildly, incredibly successful, I said, not looking back. I'm going to build an empire. I'm going to help thousands of people who were treated the way you treated me. I'm going to be interviewed, celebrated, respected. And every time you see my name in a magazine or hear about my latest success, I want you to remember this moment. I want you to remember that you had a daughter who could have shared all of that with you, who wanted nothing more than your love and approval, and you threw her away for someone prettier. Rachel, please. Mom's voice was barely a whisper. Goodbye, I said. Don't contact me again. I walked out of that house and got into my Tesla. I sat there for a moment, my hands shaking on the steering wheel, my heart pounding. I'd done it. I'd faced them. I'd said everything I needed to say. And I felt empty. Not satisfied, not vindicated, just empty. As I started the car, I saw Emma run out of the house, waving her arms. I could have driven away, should have driven away. But something made me roll down the window. She ran up to the car, breathless, mascara running down her face. Rachel, wait, please. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Sorry doesn't fix anything, I said. I know it doesn't. But I need you to know. I didn't understand. I didn't see how badly they treated you. I was so caught up in my own life, my own problems, that I never noticed how invisible they made you feel. She was crying hard now, genuine sobs that shook her whole body. And now I'm the one who's invisible. I lost my job. My boyfriend left me. I had to move back home. I'm living the life you lived, and it's horrible, and I finally understand. I finally see what I did to you, what we all did to you. Good, I said coldly. Maybe you'll be a better person for it. I want to be. I want to change. She grabbed the car door, desperate. I want to be your sister, a real sister. Please, Rachel, give me a chance. I looked at her, really looked at her. She was broken in a way I'd never been, because I'd had to build my own strength while she'd been given everything and learned nothing. She was facing the world with no skills, no resilience, no ability to cope with hardship. Part of me, a very small part, felt pity. But the larger part remembered every cruelty, every dismissal, every time she'd taken something of mine and never looked back. No, I said simply, you had 28 years to be my sister. You chose not to be. That choice has consequences. But I was a kid. I didn't know. You're not a kid anymore, and you still only care about me now that you need something from me. That's not sisterhood. That's desperation. And I started rolling up the window. She banged on it, frantic. Please, Rachel, please, I'll change. I promise I'll change. Just help me, help us, please. I looked at her one last time. Learn to help yourself, like I did. I drove away. In my rearview mirror, I watched her collapse on the lawn, sobbing. I watched my parents come out to comfort her, the three of them huddled together in their grief and desperation. And I kept driving. The years that followed were even better than the ones before. My venture capital firm became one of the top 3 in the world. I diversified into real estate development, tech startups, sustainable energy. My net worth crossed $1 billion when I was 29. I was named one of the most powerful women in business. I bought a mansion in Palo Alto, a penthouse in New York, a villa in the south of France. I dated brilliant, successful people who saw me as an equal. I traveled the world. I spoke at conferences and universities. I wrote a book about financial independence that became a bestseller. I expanded my foundation, helping more and more young people escape toxic family situations and build their own lives. I personally mentored dozens of kids who reminded me of myself, overlooked, underestimated, determined to prove their worth. And my family? They faded into the background of my life, becoming less and less relevant with each passing year. I heard through the grapevine, old high school friends, social media stalking, that things got worse for them. They lost the house eventually, had to move into a small apartment. Dad took an early retirement due to health issues. Mom got a job at a grocery store. Emma worked a series of low-paying retail jobs, never able to hold on to anything for long. They tried to contact me sporadically over the years, emails on my birthday, messages on LinkedIn, a letter delivered through my foundation, which my assistant intercepted and threw away. Each attempt became more desperate, more pleading. I ignored them all. I wasn't cruel enough to gloat, but I wasn't kind enough to forgive either. I simply moved forward, building my empire, living my best life, proving every day that I didn't need them and never had. The final confrontation came 5 years after that terrible visit home. I was 33 years old, celebrating my company's 10th anniversary with a massive gala in San Francisco. 500 guests, A-list celebrities, tech moguls, philanthropists. The event was covered by every major business publication. I wore a custom Versace gown and $20 million in borrowed Harry Winston jewelry. I gave a speech about resilience, independence, and the power of believing in yourself even when no one else does. The party was in full swing when my assistant approached me, looking uncomfortable. Rachel, there are 3 people at the door claiming to be your family. Security is holding them, but they're insisting they need to see you. Of course they were. I should have had security remove them immediately. Should have pretended they didn't exist and gone back to celebrating my success. Instead, I felt that old curiosity, that need to know what they wanted now. Let them in, I said. But keep security close? Mom, Dad, and Emma were escorted into a private room off the main ballroom. They looked even worse than the last time I'd seen them. Older, more worn down, cheaper clothes that didn't fit right. They stood in the lavish room looking completely out of place, 3 faded ghosts from a past I'd left behind. Rachel, Mom said, her voice trembling. Thank you for seeing us. I have 5 minutes, I said coldly. What do you want? Dad cleared his throat. We wanted to apologize, properly, for everything. You've had 13 years to apologize. Why now? Emma stepped forward. She'd lost weight, her face gaunt and tired. Because we finally understand. Because we've lost everything, and we know now what it feels like to be where you were, and we're sorry. We're so, so sorry. Sorry you did it, or sorry you got caught? Sorry you hurt me, or sorry that you need me now? No answer. That's what I thought. I checked my watch. 3 minutes left. Please, Mom begged. We're desperate. Your father needs surgery we can't afford. Emma's struggling with depression. I'm working 2 jobs and it's not enough. We need help, Rachel. We need family. You needed family 18 years ago when you were stealing from me. You needed family when you were ignoring me and dismissing me and treating me like I was worthless. But you didn't care about family then. You only care now because you want something from me. We were wrong, Dad said, his voice hoarse. We see that now. We were terrible parents to you and we're sorry. But we're still your family. No, I interrupted. You're not. Family doesn't treat people the way you treated me. Family doesn't steal from their own children. Family doesn't neglect and abuse and manipulate. You were never my family. You were just people I happened to live with who made my childhood miserable. So that's it? Emma's voice rose. You're just going to let us suffer? You're that heartless? I laughed. I'm heartless? I'm heartless? You stole my inheritance, gave me trauma that took years of therapy to process, and made me feel worthless my entire childhood. And I'm the heartless one for not giving you money now. You have billions, Emma shouted. You could help us without even noticing. $100,000 would be nothing to you. You're right, I said quietly. It would be nothing to me. And you know what? That makes this even better. Because I'm not going to give it to you. Not because I can't afford it, but because you don't deserve it. Mom started crying again. Please, Rachel, please, I'm begging you, have mercy. The same mercy you showed me when I asked for help paying for college? The same mercy you showed me when I begged you to come to my science fair presentation? The same mercy you showed me when I needed someone to talk to about being bullied and you told me to stop being so sensitive? They had no response. They knew I was right. Time's up, I said. Security will escort you out. Rachel, goodbye, I said firmly. For the last time, goodbye. Security came in and started ushering them toward the door. Mom was sobbing. Dad looked defeated. Emma turned back, her face twisted with anger and desperation. You're going to regret this, she screamed. Karma will get you. You can't just abandon your family and expect to be happy. I smiled at her. Actually, I can, and I am. Watch me. They were removed from the building, and I returned to my party. I danced with investors and philanthropists. I clinked glasses with tech giants. I laughed and celebrated and didn't think about them at all, because I had won. Not because I had money, though I had more of that than I could ever spend. Not because I was famous, though I was certainly known in all the circles that mattered. I had won because I was happy. Genuinely, completely happy. I had built a life entirely on my own terms. I had proven that I didn't need their love, their approval, or their validation. I had taken every bit of pain they'd inflicted on me and used it as fuel to become something extraordinary. I had won because I was free. The epilogue to this story isn't dramatic. There was no reconciliation, no tearful reunion, no moment where they realized the error of their ways and I welcomed them back with open arms. This is real life, not a fairy tale. The last I heard, they'd moved to a different state, trying to start over. I don't know where they are now, and I don't care to find out. They're simply not part of my life anymore. I'm 35 now. My company is worth billions. My foundation has helped over 10,000 young people escape abusive situations and build independent lives. I've been featured on the cover of Time magazine. I've given a TED Talk that's been viewed 50 million times. I have friends who love me for who I am. I have a partner who sees me, really sees me, and values me. I have a chosen family of people who show up for me the way my biological family never did. And sometimes, late at night when I can't sleep, I think about that other life. The one where I died at 26 in a car accident, never having escaped their influence, never having built anything of my own, and that Rachel died angry and hurt and feeling worthless. This Rachel lives triumphantly, knowing her worth, having proven it to herself if no one else. I won, not because they lost, though they did, but because I finally completely won my own life back. And that's worth more than any amount of money, any amount of success, any amount of vindication. I am free, I am happy, I am enough, and I always was.